From murder in Belfast to the White House, the McCartneys take their anti-IRA campaign to the president as Irish Republicans are frozen out of St Patrick's Day. Good evening. If St Patrick's Day is a time when winter dreams turn to summer magic, the McCartneys might think they've started something. Tonight they tell us how they went from victims of crime after a Belfast murder to guests of President Bush. He backed their campaign against the IRA, saying it could bring peace to Northern Ireland, and shunned the usual visitors to the White House on this day, Gerry Adams and Sinn Féin. Also tonight, when is a cut actually an increase? The Tories say Blair and Brown are telling downright lies about their plans for public services. But who's got the most to gain from her back in the spotlight? Executed from Israel on a Japanese target based in London. How Britain's cyber cops fought the biggest attempted bank robbery ever on the internet. And dumb animals or sensitive souls. How there's more to a sheep than stew and Ugg boots.
And the other headlines tonight: the jury in the trial of Andrew Ragg, accused of murdering his terminally ill son, is discharged without reaching a verdict. The government is told its £5 billion big idea for education, city academies, should be put on hold. And the Sri Lankan foreign minister thanks the British people for their generosity over the tsunami, but he tells Channel 4 News he hasn't yet received a cent of government aid.
President Bush has given his personal backing to the family of the murdered Belfast man, Robert McCartney, telling them he is 100% behind their campaign. The five sisters and fiancé of Mr. McCartney were the president's guests at the traditional St Patrick's Day celebrations at the White House. For the first time in a decade, no Northern Ireland political leaders were invited, a clear signal patience is running out with the continued paramilitary activity. The Sinn Féin leader, Gerry Adams, has called it an attempt to criminalise the Republican movement. Well, in a moment, we will be asking Catherine McCartney about her talks with the president, but first, our Washington correspondent Jonathan Rugman reports.
They've taken their campaign for justice to the White House, while Northern Ireland's politicians were told to stay away. A once ordinary family talking peace with America's president, because others have failed.
This family want justice for Robert, and they want his killers and their accomplices brought to account, and that the peace process cannot really succeed unless justice goes hand in hand with that. So if we get justice for Robert, it means the people in Ireland back home will also feel that the process has moved on, that they too will receive justice if this ever happens to them.
To take time out to grieve for your brother.
And meeting the McCartneys for the first time, Anne McCabe, widow of a policeman killed by the IRA in Ireland 9 years ago. Women from both sides of the border, piling pressure on the president to pile pressure on the IRA.
You can't get down to peace by bombs and bullets. It's only through peaceful means and dialogue.
After the president had received his traditional shamrock from Ireland's Taoiseach, Bertie Ahern, he met the sisters behind closed doors. They did not, though, give him a dossier on their brother's death, preferring to explain the circumstances themselves.
But from the impression we got that he had a very good understanding of what our cause was about, what had happened to Robert. And as I say, we didn't need to explain anything to him. He already knew it and gave us his 100% support for it.
And in a hotel just a few hundred metres away, Gerry Adams, White House pariah, but greeted like a hero by America's friends of Sinn Féin.
The leader of the peace process in all of Ireland, Gerry Adams.
He thanked them for keeping faith with his cause, a leader shoring up his Irish-American backers in the wake of Senator Ted Kennedy's refusal to see him and demand that the IRA disarm.
There's an attempt to criminalise our struggle, an attempt which failed when Thatcher tried it. We will also not allow any rogue elements on the fringes of republicanism to criminalise our struggle and to drag our struggle down.
Yesterday, the president's Northern Ireland envoy asked Adams just what he needed to get the IRA to disarm. This morning, he wasn't really saying.
The process is in a mess. There aren't any political institutions. There isn't a police service acceptable to the majority of nationalists. in the north of Ireland. The equality agenda hasn't kicked in. We don't have a Bill of Rights.
So are you saying all this has to change before you think the IRA should decide?
I'm not saying that. What I am saying is it isn't a single item agenda.
And among these Irish Americans, broad agreement that the IRA must give up the armed struggle, disagreement over when.
The question of disbanding is up to the IRA. After all, the British are still in Ireland. The British haven't announced their intention to withdraw from Ireland, so I think that the IRA will remain in Ireland until the British declare their intention to leave.
I think all Irish Americans who study the issue think that arms should be taken off the table on both sides, yes.
US officials admit that were Adams to wind up Sinn Féin's armed wing, it might spell his death sentence. Yet at an Irish charity dinner last night, the Sinn Féin leader forced to listen as one leading senator described the IRA as nothing better than an organised crime syndicate given to stealing and murder. The McCartney family at the other end of the same room, bells of the ball. Have you met the McCartney sisters on this trip?
No, not yet, no.
But you were in the same room last night.
So was 1,000 other people.
Okay. Do you need to talk?
Yep. We talk continuously, we remain in contact on an ongoing basis.
Okay, gentlemen.
This St. Patrick's Day as colourful as usual here, but thrown into confusion by a family standing up to the politicians and demanding justice. America's rose-tinted image of the Emerald Isle, challenged today by the McCartneys' anger and grief. Jonathan Rugman, Channel 4 News, Washington.
Well, joining us now from Washington is Catherine McCartney. What did the President say to you, and what did you say to him?
Well, the President offered us his condolences on the death of Robert, and he spoke to Regine about Robert and the two children, and he said that he was 100% behind us on our quest for justice.
And what is that quest now in your eyes? What are you trying to see, and what has he given you backing for?
Well, obviously our quest has been what has been from the start, that Robert's murderers and their accomplices should appear in a court, and that is what the President has given his backing for. And right across the board, people agree on that these people should be brought to account for their actions. Our problem is how do we get that? How do we get there to that point?
He's now quoted as saying that your campaign could solve the peace process in Northern Ireland. Did he explain to you his thinking there?
No, it was a very short discussion. We met the President along with a lot of other community leaders, and we didn't discuss that at all. But he did say that he felt that it was an important step in the peace process, because he understands, as a lot of people in Ireland and across the world understand, you can't have democracy without justice. And we need justice for Robert, and the people of Ireland also need to feel that they too will have justice.
Is your goal beyond your brother's killers brought to justice, the total disbandment of the IRA?
We only have one objective. Our objective is very specific, and that is to get the men who murdered Robert on Sunday the 30th of January into a court. And we want the witnesses who were there that night to come forward and tell all they know about what happened that night, so that the police then can gather the necessary evidence to be able to charge these people.
But can you see the IRA continuing then within the process of Northern Irish politics?
Well, as I say, from our point of view, the only thing we are interested in is justice for Robert, and we are going to be working with everyone across the board in order to achieve that goal.
There's been talk, of course, about you or somebody else from your campaign standing in a future election against Sinn Féin. Have you had any more thoughts about that?
We haven't decided completely yet, but just let me make it clear, it wouldn't be against Sinn Féin. What we'd be standing for would be on an independent ticket of justice. That may not be the right road to go down at this point. We haven't made a decision on that. Standing for election takes up an awful lot of time and commitment, and our goal is to get justice for Robert. And if we feel that that would deflect from that, we will not go down that road.
What do you say to Gerry Adams tonight? He said to our reporter that he's in constant contact with you. Is that correct?
Yes, we have been in contact with Sinn Féin over the past couple of weeks. We haven't met Gerry Adams here in Washington over the past 2 days. Our schedule has been very busy, but we are going to speak to anyone who can help us get justice for Robert.
Catherine McCartney, thanks very much indeed.
Thank you.
Now, when is a promise to spend less a cut? That was the question at the heart of a fierce pre-election row as the two main parties traded blows over their public spending plans. While standing next to a poster claiming the Conservatives would impose a £35 billion cut, Tony Blair was forced to admit that all the Tories were promising was to increase spending more slowly than Labour. Michael Howard admitted that by 2011 he wanted to cut spending by £25 billion, but denied the Prime Minister's claim that this would devastate frontline public services. Our political correspondent Gary Gibbon reports.
Labour thinks this could be the most effective slogan of its campaign, emphasising the government's record of investment in the public services, playing on fears of Tory cuts. But the Conservatives say it's a downright lie to call their plans cuts.
They would increase it slower than you would increase it.
No, I'm actually very pleased that you've raised this. That is not what they're saying. We will give you the quote from Mr. Letwin about £35 billion worth less of spending in the lifetime of the next Parliament.
Less is not a cut, Prime Minister. It is increasing spending at a slower rate.
It is a cut over Labour's plans.
So would a Labour government be sure to spend £35 billion more than a Conservative one on Whitehall and the public sector? The closer you look at these figures, the shakier they seem. They're based on projections for spending 5 years from now. But in fact, there are no firm spending commitments that far into the future. The Tories have made a guess at what Labour's spending might look like in 5 years' time, going up to £700 billion. They've estimated their own spending would also go up, but end up just 2% or £35 billion less. Economists, though, don't consider these figures rooted in reality.
There are no firm plans for government spending beyond the end of the forthcoming spending review in 2007-08. The government thinks that spending might be a little lower looking beyond that, but it really is hard to know what Labour is going to decide to do that far into the future if they were to be re-elected.
The Conservatives stand by the £35 billion figure, but they insist those are savings that could be made without serious pain.
That's the figure for 2011-12. That's because we want to give people value for money and lower taxes. The only thing we want to cut is waste.
You're going to have an election campaign, the way things are shaping up, of two parties arguing like cats and dogs in a very negative way. You're going to have another party, the Liberal Democrats, arguing in a positive, aspirational way, addressing the fundamental needs of the country.
Mr Blair, visiting the Forest of Dean constituency this afternoon, says the Conservatives would be bound to make cuts into frontline services. He says their past proves it. In Romford, that past was on display. Baroness Thatcher was opening the local Conservative Association headquarters. The Conservatives have shied away from the bolder tax cuts of the Thatcher years, but Labour's hoping it can still label the Tories as the party that neglects public services in favour of tax cuts.
Well, with me now, the Cabinet Office Minister David Miliband and the Conservative frontbencher Theresa May. David Miliband, why did your two biggest hitters stand in front of a poster today that was clearly a lie?
Well, it certainly isn't a lie. It's a quotation from Oliver Letwin, the Shadow Chancellor. And this is a rather amazing situation where we're accused of lying when we're simply reproducing the quotes and the proud boasts of the Conservative Shadow Chancellor. And I think the Conservatives should just be honest. They do believe that we should have a smaller amount of national income spent by government on public services and other things.
But they're not going to cut anything by £35 billion.
No, I'm sorry. They are absolutely clear. They're proud of the fact that they're going to be spending £35 billion less than the Labour Party at the end of the next election. And that cut, Michael Howard says it's only in 2011. The choice that the electorate have to make at the general election will be a choice for now, and that it will last right throughout the next Parliament.
Theresa May.
And there will be a clear choice for the voters come the general election, and that clear choice will be between a Labour government which will have higher taxes and more waste, and a Conservative government that will provide lower taxes and value for money.
But let's just be very clear on this claim. The £35 billion cut, as claimed by Labour, true or false?
No, what we're going to do is cut waste. We are not going to be cutting public spending. We are going to be increasing our spending on things like the NHS, on education, on pensions, on transport. What we are going to do is be concentrating our spending on the issues that matter to people. And I don't think there is anybody watching this tonight who, hand on heart, would say that they think the government spends every pound of taxpayers' money as wisely as they could. Well, there is a lot of waste, and we're going to cut that waste out.
This is an extremely unwise course that Theresa May has set out on. By denying the question, by saying no to the question, she's contradicting her own colleague, the man who sets the financial perspective for the Conservative Party. He's proud of the fact that he's going to reduce public spending from 42% of national income to just under 40%.
He's going to spend less than you would.
Exactly.
We've got to be very clear about our language. He's going to increase spending on the health service.
These are big figures, but let's understand what they mean. £35 billion is greater than the entire schools budget. The idea that by finding a few extra paper clips you're going to be able to save £35 billion is simply wrong, and we know that from the Conservatives' own plans. If you take the plans...
If you've looked at our plans, do you deny that in our plans we have set out absolutely clearly, and our plans are fully costed and funded, we've set out clearly how we will spend more on schools, more on hospitals, more on pensions, more on transport?
No, let me give you
do you deny those?
I deny it, absolutely. Let me give you an example. You say you're going to save £600 million from strategic health authorities by abolishing them. We only spend £100 million on strategic health authorities. So tell me, where is that £600 million coming from?
Do you deny that we are...
Can you just answer? You asked me a very direct question.
Yes.
And I said to you, you're claiming £600 million. Just let me finish the point. £600 million from strategic health authorities. They only spend, in total, £100 million. What's the answer to that?
The answer to that is clearly set out in the proposals that we've put
no,
forward in the James report.
It's very important, this.
Yes, it is important, obviously. We have set out, and this isn't just something that we've done on the back of an envelope. It's not just something that we've sort of pulled out of thin air. What we've done is we've had David James and a whole group of experts over a year costing out all the waste that we can save.
But isn't the whole thing pulled out of thin air is the truth? You've no idea what a government will be spending on the public services in 2011.
We are bringing to public attention...
Has it been committed?
We are bringing, just let me finish, we are bringing to public attention the policies of the Conservative Party.
Yeah, just on these numbers, because you're the people who put out this poster today on numbers saying the Tories would cut £35 billion. Isn't it true that you have no idea what the government will be spending on public services in 2011, which is the year you're talking about, because the decisions haven't been made yet. The whole thing is a fantasy.
It's not a fantasy at all. It's very, very real, because the Labour government's spending plans have been set out in detail up till...
Until when?
Until 2008-9 in the spending review.
So not up until 2011?
Let me finish the point. And the Conservatives have then made a prudent assumption that we will continue to spend at the same rate of growth as that of the economy at large. And they're saying they want to spend £35 billion less. And the choice is very clear for the country. Do they want to carry on with the economic stability and growth that we've had and the investment in public services, or do they want to take the economic risk with the Conservatives and, more than that, cut into frontline public services? It's a choice that I think is clear.
There isn't going to be a cut into frontline public services, and I'm afraid I think it's a sign of the desperation of the Labour Party that they're having to make these claims today. We will be increasing spending on the public services, on things that really matter to people like schools and hospitals and pensions, and there will be a clear choice. David is right, there is a clear choice at the election, but that choice is between higher taxes and more waste under Labour, or lower taxes and value
as
for money
Tony Blair
under us.
said today when pressed on this, you will be spending £35 billion less on our public services than a Labour government would be. That is a true statement.
In the year 2011-2012, the expectation is that we will have increased spending at a slightly lower rate than the Labour Party will have increased spending. But we are not, we are not cutting service money that is being spent on frontline public services. That is where the Labour Party is quite wrong.
Just briefly, were you glad to see Lady Thatcher out today? Do you think you've got more to gain from her public appearances than Labour?
I'm pleased to see that Lady Thatcher is well enough to be able to go and do that opening today, and I'm sure the people of Romford were very pleased to see her.
Well, I'm sure we're all delighted that she's well, but it does make it very clear the choice is to go forward or to go back.
David Miliband, Theresa May, thank you both very much. Now, the jury in the case of a former soldier accused of murdering his terminally ill son is discharged without reaching a verdict. Sarah Smith has the details.
The former SAS soldier Andrew Ragg has to wait to find out if he'll be tried again. He's been accused of murdering his 10-year-old son Jacob at the family home in Worthing, West Sussex on July 24th last year. He denies the charge, and Darshna Soni was at today's hearing.
Emerging from court having divided a jury, a father accused of murdering his own son. 10-year-old Jacob Ragg, happy, affectionate, inquisitive, smothered to death by his father while he slept. Andrew Ragg, a former SAS soldier commended for his service, he claimed it was a mercy killing. Mary Ragg admitted her husband had told her he was going to end their son's life, but said she never actually believed he would do it. Jacob suffered from Hunter's syndrome, a rare degenerative disease which left him deaf and confined to a wheelchair. In court, his parents described the pressures of caring for him. He wasn't expected to live beyond his teens. At the time of Jacob's death, Mr. Ragg had been working as a private security guard in Iraq. His defence claimed he was left traumatised when he was almost killed in a suicide attack. When he returned, Jacob's condition had worsened. Mr. Ragg told the court, "All communication had gone. He looked sad and fed up with life. I didn't want him to suffer." On the day of the killing, Mr. Ragg went drinking with friends. Later he was found to be 3 times over the limit. He called his wife and told her, "Tonight's the night." Mary Ragg left Jacob home alone and drove their other child to her mum's. She denied it was because she knew what her husband was going to do. Mr. Ragg told the court, "I put a pillow over his face. Then I stroked his head and tried to explain why I had thought it was the best thing for him." When Mary Ragg got home, the couple opened a bottle of wine and Mr. Ragg toasted Jacob, saying he's at peace now. But Mary Ragg went on to give evidence against her husband as the main prosecution witness. Andrew Ragg had always pleaded guilty to manslaughter on the grounds of diminished responsibility, but the CPS decided to charge him with murder. But because the jury have failed to reach a verdict on this charge, the CPS must now decide whether to order a complete retrial. In the meantime, Mr. Ragg has been released on bail. Darshna Soni, Channel 4 News at Lewis Crown Court.
A hoard of £10,000 worth of jewellery seized from the garage of Dr. Harold Shipman's home when the doctor was first arrested may now go to his widow. The 70 items of jewellery include a quantity of wedding rings and also necklaces, brooches, bracelets and earrings, all of varying value. The police believe that some of the items may have been stolen by Britain's biggest serial killer after he injected his victims with morphine overdoses. Unless the families of his victims can prove the items belong to their murdered loved ones, then the police must return the items to the killer's widow.
With people who kill, they lack a conscience, so they're capable of doing all sorts of dishonest acts, and petty theft is one of them, and given the opportunity they will steal from their victim. In a few cases, they take something that will remind them of the excitement of the act of killing, but then it's more usually clothing rather than jewellery.
The pensioner, Margaret Dixon, whose cancelled operations caused a major political row, has finally had her op. Her family say the 69-year-old Mrs. Dixon successfully underwent surgery on her shoulder yesterday. The operation wasn't actually due to take place until next week, but it was brought forward by the hospital. 2 men have been cleared of being involved in the bombing of an Air India jet 20 years ago. The airliner exploded over the Irish coast while en route to Toronto from Heathrow. And a judge in Canada acquitted the 2 Indian-born Sikhs. He said the case against them had not been proved beyond reasonable doubt. After the £40 million trial, families of the 320 victims have now called for a public inquiry. And the nuclear whistleblower Mordechai Vanunu has been charged in Israel with violating the terms of his release from prison by speaking to foreign reporters and by trying to visit the West Bank. Vanunu, who was not taken into custody today, could be jailed, though, for up to 2 years if he's convicted. He was a former technician at Israel's top-secret Dimona nuclear reactor. He's now 50 and he served an 18-year prison term for spilling atomic secrets to the Sunday Times in 1986.
When we come back, British detectives foil one of the world's biggest attempted bank robberies. Plus, Tony Blair said they were the future of education. But with city academies languishing at the bottom of the school league tables, should they now be scrapped? Welcome back. Now, if it had succeeded, it would have been one of the world's biggest bank raids. But an international plot to steal £220 million from the London offices of a Japanese bank was foiled just in time. One man is in custody in Israel. Others are still being sought by the British high-tech crime unit. And police are warning financial institutions and other large organisations a new generation of cyber criminals are the latest threat to their security. Our science reporter, Tom Clark, has this.
Escorted by Israeli police, Yaron Bolondi, a suspected member of the gang who nearly pulled off one of the most audacious high-tech crimes ever attempted, trying to remain as faceless as the electronic transfer that was to put £14 million of cash into his business account, just one of the 10 transfers to separate accounts worldwide, totalling some £220 million. The target was the London office of Japan's Sumitomo Bank. It alerted police in October when the unauthorised transfers were spotted before the money cleared. Today, the Sumitomo Group declined to comment, but it's emerging this was no simple heist. Experts think an organised crime gang recruited individuals to steal passwords used at the bank to make financial transactions. In this case, the first of its kind in the UK, they exploited a technique called key logging. Either a device or a piece of software is attached to the computer that monitors and records everything that's typed into the keyboard. Channel 4 News understands the Sumitomo raid involved at least one insider. They surreptitiously installed commercially available key logging software onto a PC at the bank used to transfer large sums of money. After several working days, the insider scoured the log file for password details, all they needed to make the illegal transfers.
This is the ultimate identity theft. People have been talking about identity theft for a long time, and it's normally about stealing credit cards. This is stealing a bank's credit card, in a way, and facilitating a £220 million transaction.
Like the bank, the police are saying nothing. Computer forensic work on the other transfers by the National High-Tech Crime Unit is expected to lead to more arrests. The crime has huge implications for the corporate world. Alongside firewalls and antivirus software, passwords have underpinned company security. Key logging lays them bare.
Where large organisations are concerned, banks, building societies, big companies, they have to make sure they have big security in place. Not only do they have to look outside of the threat from serious and organised crime gangs in Russia and South America and elsewhere, but also from the risks of people working for those companies in trusted positions.
Sumitomo escaped, but it's now clear that key logging, once the preserve of hackers, has been adopted by organised crime. The fear is any company without the robust security used by banks could well fall victim.
You're watching Channel 4 News. Our main headlines tonight. The jury in the trial of Andrew Ragg, accused of murdering his terminally ill son, has been discharged without reaching a verdict. The Prime Minister has been involved in a fierce pre-election row over his claims the Conservatives would impose a £35 billion cut in spending if elected. And President Bush has given his personal backing to the family of the murdered Belfast man Robert McCartney, telling them he is 100% behind their campaign for justice. Now, Tony Blair thinks they're the future for secondary education, but a Labour-dominated committee of MPs said today that city academies should be shelved until the government proves their value for money. 17 of the privately sponsored city schools have opened, but the government wants to see 200 of them by 2010. The cost to the taxpayer is £5 billion, a sum so large that the Education Select Committee says the academy programme should be suspended. Nearly all of the existing academies replaced failing schools, but their latest test results show they're still among the worst in England. Samira Ahmed visited one of them in North London.
Capital City Academy, with its 900+ pupils, certainly